I was raised in Oshawa, Ontario, with my parents. We lived together up until their divorce in the late 90s. My dad wasn't always around a lot. For the most part, always my mom and I, which created some tension later in life with my dad because I didn't have a relationship with him really. But with my mother being around all the time, we were close, but she was also an alcoholic, so it made it kind of difficult to have proper conversations with her. She would get both verbally and physically abusive if I didn't do whatever correctly. When I finally drew the line with her, it was right when we were expecting my son Jack to be born. My parents had already separated. She was living off with a boyfriend of hers a couple hours away, so it wasn't like I saw her very often. So we made a special trip to go see her that day. And anything that could go wrong that day went wrong. And they started smoking crystal meth in front of me and in front of my pregnant wife. That's when I absolutely lost it. At the end of that day, it ended with me yelling and saying, "If you don't clean your act up, I'm never allowing you in my life again." So, and that was 10 years ago, and I've not talked to her since. My dad was my baseball coach, he was my soccer coach. So, I mean, I did spend time with him, just not a whole lot. I remember that it was the Detroit Tigers versus the California Angels. So after the ball game, I believe we went to have dinner, and then back to the hotel room where there's this woman in the room with us. And I remember when I was going into bed, my dad said, "Okay, well, close your eyes, roll over, face the wall," but I could hear what was going on. And I remember I started crying, and that's when she left, and my dad basically tried to soothe that one over, but he said, "You know, whatever you saw, whatever you heard, let's just keep that between you and me." And that was even at that age, I knew that something was not right with that. I was 18 or 19 years old, same kind of time frame that my parents were splitting up. I accepted an invitation from our local MP to go to Ottawa for a party convention. I was initially going to be staying in a hostel because it was well within my budget at that point. It was a disgusting place. I didn't want to stay there. So I had gone back over and I was talking to some of the other people that came up from our riding association as well. And one fella, he said, "Well, no, we'll get a cot and you can stay in my room." So that first night, I went and got my things from the hostel, went back to his hotel room. And I was having a drink with him, and that's kind of slowly where it starts to fade out. But I do remember some of the other people in our group had said, just be careful. But I took it as, well, he's a womanizer. I woke up at some point, and I was in the bathroom, and I knew that something had happened to me. I didn't know what at that time, but then it happened again the next night that I was there as well. With the alcohol, it became monkey see, monkey do. When my parents would come home from work, the first thing they would do is they would open up a beer. When dinner was being served, there was always a glass of wine or a bottle of wine on the table. Before bed, it was always my dad would have a scotch. Same thing, my mother would always have like a cran and vodka. So there was always alcohol around, and I can't think of too many family get-togethers that I went to where everybody had a drink in their hand. It just seemed, oh, well, that's what you do. So when I became old enough and I was living on my own, I always made sure I had beer in the house, or if there was wine, always had scotch as well, so it just became progressively more and more. And when it started to become a daily habit was really around the time of the Thorpe McMurray fires. Processing all what you see and just numbing yourself with alcohol. But then it snowballed out of control at that point. I hid it and lied about it as long as I could until I got caught.
I mean, I always knew that he drank, before bed, and I always kind of thought like it was borderline excessive, but it was like, didn't seem like a problem. He cooked supper every night and went to work every day, and perfect example of a functioning alcoholic. He said he was gonna stop, and then it was after that that I had to drink from his water bottle and found out that not only had he not stopped, but he was lying to me about it, which for me, that was a no-no.
Hitting the rock bottom.
Yeah.
And each time that I would get down again, I would be thinking to myself, oh, this is it, this is my rock bottom. Not being back into the house. Oh, that's gotta be it, that's gotta be rock bottom. Not seeing the kids. That's got to be it. That's got to be rock bottom. And it wasn't until, like I said, that one weekend that I tried to control my alcohol, thinking maybe I'm different, maybe I can have just a drink, and finding out, no, you can't.
And so then I drove him to Thorpe when he decided to go to detox. And I was really proud of him for making that decision himself. Like, I didn't tell him he had to go or anything. He just decided to go, so that was really positive.
So I didn't know that if I just quit drinking, that it was going to be really hard on my body. So when I got to Thorpe, I don't really remember the first 2 days. If it wasn't for the fact that I kept a journal with me that first time, I don't think I'd remember any of it. But coming down from the alcohol and detoxing, it's friggin' painful. It was not something that I ever want to do again. I would never want that for anybody. It was terrible. And it was the same thing the second time. I probably slept for the first 2 or 3 days that I was there. And even the relapse going into the hospital in Stony Plain, just complete shakes. And sweating, and it was gross. Night at the hospital, I remember we were just in like curtained off sections in the ER, and I was explaining to the nurse and to the doctor why I was there and what I needed to do, and they took some samples and they saw how, I guess, intoxicated I was. But there was an older gentleman beside me on the side of a curtain, but his wife had come in, and I think they must have thought I was asleep, because what I heard was, oh, well, that fella there, he's nothing but a rotten drunk. So, and yeah, that was a very low moment for me. And also the doctor didn't appear that he wanted to really help me. My second time going in for the detox over Christmas is when I met a counselor there who I had a real good connection with. That was a game changer for me, because he made that portion of recovery fun, proper for me.
Hey man, how you doing?
Not bad.
Come here, come here.
How you doing?
Makes me really proud. Really proud of all the work you did, man. I hope you're as proud of yourself as I am of you.
Well, thank you. I am. Especially after the relapse, it was a lot of you. What was it? you can kick yourself in the ass only once, because after that it's abuse.
Correctamundo.
Yes. So I stopped trying to be perfect, and that's what I was doing, that was causing the not failures, although that's the first attempt at learning. But I was trying to stop being so perfect. Thank you very much.
Oh, you take care, Aaron.
Thank
It
you.
was so good to see you again.
Yes, you too.
I'm always proud of him, you know. I'm proud of him. I was proud of him even when he was not doing good. But now I'm just proud of him for doing it for himself. Regardless of whether or not I'm in his life, he wants to feel better and he wants to do better and he wants to, you know, be happy and healthy. And
I try to exercise. I like doing yoga. But I mean, all these little things that I would never have done before, those are things I want to incorporate in my life now and just be healthy.
Hi, baby girl.